Hey guys, what's up? It's Timothy here. So there have been a couple spoilers for Aether Revolt coming out like here and there. I don't know how they're being distributed or where they're coming from, but they're official spoilers, and they've been coming out like sporadically. Like you'll just come check the spoilers one day, and they'll be like, "All right, here's a card from the new set," and then like 3 days later, "All right, here's another card from the new set. Check this out." And it's kind of strange. I'm not sure what the reasoning behind it is, but it's not usual to see like this many spoilers ahead of actual spoiler season, which probably won't begin for another 2 weeks or so. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and look at all of the cards that have been spoiled since my last video. Consulate Crackdown is the first one that I haven't actually discussed or talked about at all, and there are about three or four here that I wanted to look out. But start with Consulate Crackdown. Like, we can say, well, I guess I should read it for anybody who somehow has missed this or hasn't seen it yet. It's 3 and double white, so 5 mana for an enchantment that says when it enters the battlefield, you exile all artifacts your opponents control until Consulate Crackdown leaves the battlefield. So it's an O-ring type effect for all of your opponent's artifacts. And honestly, that's, in my opinion, in limited, that's not a great effect. Like, this is the type of card that you're going to open first pick in pack 1, and you'll pass it pretty much every time, unless decks tend to gear towards the side of just all artifact decks, which doesn't seem very likely. That doesn't happen in Kaladesh very often, that your opponent is playing just like the all artifact deck. And yes, this would be a great sideboard card. Sometimes there are decks that this will completely hose, or decks that this will shut down or really just kind of tamper with. But overall, it's not very great. And should probably be a sideboard card. I've also heard talk, like, if you click Mythic Spoiler and you kind of look through the comments, there are a lot of people talking about this in Modern against cards like Affinity or decks like Affinity, and just that's not ever going to happen. Yes, this card is very good against Affinity, but are you really going to board in a 5-mana hoser against Affinity? Against such a fast deck, like, by the time you get to 5 mana playing white, you've probably already lost to Affinity if that's your game plan. And also, like, Stony Silence and Kataki already do a pretty decent job of stopping Affinity, or at least, a good, at least a higher than 50% chance of the times you cast those cards on time against Affinity. They do what they're supposed to do, and they stop Affinity from working and stop it from ticking. 5 mana is not where you want to be. Also, you'll notice a lot of talk about this in Commander, and white doesn't necessarily have the best ways to deal with artifacts en masse. So this is a very good card for white. And yes, you could be a complete complete like buzzkill and play this alongside Mycosynthellatus to just kind of ruin your opponent's days. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of this card. I think the flavor's cool. I like it. It's the console is cracked down on everything, obviously, and confiscated everything, so all the artifacts are gone. And then when the console is overthrown or whatever, all the artifacts come back. So the flavor is really cool here, but the card itself, not super amazing. It is worth noting it is the Story Spotlight card, the first out of 5. And last time we had checked out the other 4 that they showed us. This one came out, obviously, like a whole week after the rest. But moving on, Oath of Ajani. This one was spoiled on Magic's official website in one of the articles. I forget what the article was. I think it was a Standard Showdown article. But the card is Oath of Ajani, the first multicolored oath. Probably a good sign that we'll see a couple more of these in upcoming sets. But for green and a white, you get a legendary enchantment. It is a rare, and when it enters the battlefield, you put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. In addition to that, planeswalker spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Now, there are a lot of applications for this. Obviously, if you go Oath of Nissa on turn 1, Oath of Ajani on turn 2, you can play any 4-mana planeswalker on turn 3 without really any mana considerations. That includes things like Chandra, that includes a turn 3 Gideon. Like, those are very, very insanely strong plays if that's what you're doing. It does require kind of like the perfect nut draw, so to speak. But the question here is if that first ability really is worth it. And yes, that is a strong ability. Obviously, it's not a turn 2 ability. But if you're playing green-white humans, or you're playing, a green-white token deck, which I'm leaning towards saying might make a comeback here if they keep supporting the archetype, then, you have a really strong card on your hand here. As is, I don't think this card is amazing by any chance. And I'm talking about Standard, obviously, here. But it does have the potential to kind of push green-white in a certain direction, a more go-wide strategy. Green-white is not, like, super played right now. I said the same thing when they spoiled Ajani, whatever its name is, the new Ajani, that it doesn't really have a home now, but if they keep supporting the archetype, it could push green-white into the limelight, and I think that's what they're doing with this card. Now, green-white humans already has Always Watching, which is actually just, you know, a pretty good version of what this is already doing. This has a little bit of an extra benefit in that it makes the Gideons cost a little less, which green-white humans do play. If we start gearing towards the side of token decks, I could see Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, making a resurgence with a card like this, because the Enter the Battlefield trigger is essentially the same as Nissa's minus ability, which puts a 1/1 counter on everything, and it makes going wide really, really easy. But I don't know. I'm a little excited to see whether this sees play or not. I'm sure it will. I'm sure there will be some sort of go-wide strategy, but I don't really know what to think of this. It also reminds me of this card here, Abzan Ascendancy, which had the same exact Enter the Battlefield trigger. Abzan Ascendancy was not a super popular card, just because Abzan had such strong cards in its foray in Standard that, you know, it was hard to find room for every Abzan card. Also, it had the little extra benefit of the non-token thing, but keep in mind it was a 3-color card. But what I wanted to note here is that Abzan Ascendancy was a mirror breaker. You would bring it in, or you would have it against other Abzan decks, and it would just push your creatures over the top of your opponent's creatures. And I could see Oath of Ajani being a very similar card in that vein, where if green-white becomes super popular or anything like that, your Oath of Ajanis will push your creatures above your opponent's creatures. But again, Always Watching is still in the format and has a very similar effect, and is overall much stronger if you're not worried about the Planeswalker thing. But the Planeswalker thing is actually pretty cool and could lead to some really busted decks if we build it right. Oath of Nissa, Oath of Ajani, 4-mana Planeswalker on turn 3. Pretty crazy stuff if you ask me. Moving on. Probably the most exciting card on this list is Tezzeret the Schemer. And we'll go and read through it first, because Tezzeret has some pretty interesting things going on here. It is 2 blue and a black for a 5 loyalty Planeswalker, and it has a +1. So imagine you play this plus it. That's 6 loyalty on turn 4, which is quite hard to just kind of eat through. But let's look at the abilities. The +1 essentially creates a Lotus Petal, which means you get an artifact that taps and sacks for any color of mana. It is specifically called an Ethereum Cell. If that's relevant or not, don't really know. For instance, clues have a specific name, and there are some cards that reference clues and interact with them in certain ways. We could see the same kind of thing with Ethereum Cells here. So it's kind of interesting to see where that's going to go. But as is, this is a mana ramp ability in blue-black, and it also creates artifacts, which will be relevant not only for Tezzeret, but I'm sure other cards as well. The -2 ability is target creature gets +X -X until end of turn. X is the number of artifacts you control. So this can be used to pump up one of your creatures, but it'll very most likely be... Wait, what? Very often be used to just kill an opponent's creature if you have the artifacts to support it. It's kind of interesting that normally when you see this type of ability, you would say that, yes, the Planeswalker protects itself, but you've got to already have a board of artifacts in order for this to do anything at all. It could just be a -2, like a dead -2 if you don't have the artifacts to back it up. But obviously, this is going to lead us to some sort of interactive or interesting artifact-based builds if Tezzeret wants to see his day in Standard. And keep in mind, the +1 ability does kind of stack up these artifacts to make the -2 more potent. But a lot of times, you'll play Tezzeret minus to kill off a little creature and then plus it. Obviously, this minus is probably a little bit worse than Liliana's minus, but it's a little bit more versatile in what it does. And then the -7 says you get an emblem with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 5/5. And that does not say until end of turn. So that is a permanent change a creature into a 5/5. And this does a lot of very interesting things. First off, it's pretty quick that you get to this ability. If you play Tezzeret and plus him on the turn you play him, he's at 6, and then you go plus -7. That's only 2 turns you have to protect Tezzeret in order to get this emblem off. And then suddenly you're able to make 5/5s on a whim. Keep in mind that if you plus Tezzeret and you make these Ethereum cells, but you don't sacrifice them for mana, that you have those artifacts available to you to start fueling your -7. The emblem doesn't do anything if you don't control artifacts, so you need to find a way to get them on board. And to keep them on board as well. This works with clue tokens, which is also another very interesting interaction. If you have clues just sitting around, you can turn them into 5/5 creatures, which is pretty insane. Really gives me hope that Tamiyo's Journal might see play. I have a kind of soft spot for Tamiyo's Journal, but I don't know if it's actually a standard ready card or not. But think about it. A clue every turn, a 5/5 every turn. Come on, it's got to sound sweet, right? And then, as noted by a couple people in the comments on a couple different sites, this card, Tezzeret, the -7, interacts very, very well with vehicles because it turns those vehicles into a permanent creature, meaning you no longer have to pay the crew cost in order to attack and block with them, which is pretty insane, if you ask me. The vehicles become very, very unbalanced when you no longer have to crew them. Imagine playing your Sky Sovereign or something along those lines, and then you have a permanent 5/5. Yes, it downgrades power, but whatever. Or turning your Heart of Kirin or your Smuggler's Copter into a 5/5 that doesn't have to be crewed and can attack and block. Seems pretty insane, especially the Heart of Kirin, which has a Vigilance, by the way. 5/5 on offense and defense is incredibly strong. But yes, Tezzeret is very, very good. One thing I'm kind of hoping happens here, Oath of Gideon has not really seen a lot of play. I've seen a lot of people brewing with Oath of Gideon. That's the one that the white oath that makes planeswalkers come in with an additional loyalty. If you play that on turn 3, which keep in mind that makes 2 1/1 blockers to kind of protect Tezzeret, and then you play Tezzeret on turn 4 and plus him, Tezzeret's ready to ultimate on the following turn, and that leads to some very, very insane plays. Whether or not something like that happens, I don't know. Maybe Esper is something I'll kind of push towards because I can see some of these planeswalkers interacting with each other very well. But I do like this Tezzeret. I'm interested to see if the Ethereum Cell thing is actually relevant for any other cards. I think the -2 is kind of a weak ability, but the -7 is obviously very, very strong if you can pull it off. And I'm interested to see where we go with this card. Also, he has the same pose as Ajani in Oath of Ajani for some reason. I don't know if that's intentional or not. But the last card, this one was spoiled just a couple days ago. Quicksmith Spy is a rare from the set. It's 3 and a blue for a 2/3 human artificer. When it enters the battlefield, target artifact you control gains tap to draw a card as long as you control this Quicksmith Spy. And I do want to apologize for the fire alarm going off in the back. It just started going off. But this is a blue version of the Quicksmith Rebel that we've already seen, one of the first cards that was leaked and spoiled from this set. So I don't know if this is going to be a whole cycle of creatures that come down and give an artifact an ability, or if it's just a red-blue one, because those are generally the artifact colors. But they're both actually pretty strong cards when it comes to limited. Being able to turn one of your artifacts that doesn't really do anything into a shocker or into a card draw is very, very good. And I've seen some people in the comments here say that this card really doesn't need to be a rare, that it wouldn't be broken in multiples. And no, I don't think this card is broken in multiples, but I do think it is very, very good. This type of effect in limited is actually very strong, and it's pretty good. Like, you can win games. If your deck is built with solid cards, you will win games by drawing an additional card every turn. And I just imagine situations where you play like a Puzzle Knot, and then you play Quicksmith Spy, and then you suddenly have this card drawing engine off of a card that wasn't doing anything in the first place. And that seems really good. Keep in mind, the ability is only relevant as long as you still control the Quicksmith Spy. So if your opponent kills the Spy, and it is only a 2/3, the other one's a 3/2, so they're not that hard to kill, then you kind of lose that card draw ability. So you'll very likely always get at least one card off of this, which turns this into a 4-mana 2/3 draw a card, which is already an okay card. Probably not well positioned in Kaladesh, but if you ever draw more than one card, that seems really good. And as also noted by one avid person, I forget if it was this website or not, this card is fantastic with Panharmonicon because you get to choose 2 artifacts that both tap to draw a card, and it also lets you kind of do things with your dirtily artifact, kind of build around cards that don't do anything. So like your Aether Flux Reservoir and your Panharmonicon, these cards that have kind of static abilities but don't actually do anything themselves, don't have a need to be tapped or untapped. This lets you get additional value off of them. So yes, I think this card is very strong. That's it. Just these 4 cards. I'm hoping to just kind of see them. I like that they're being spread out a little bit. And I'm not entirely sure, again, what the motives are for releasing these cards ahead of time. One thing I'm guessing is that if you remember, the Masterpiece Collection will continue into Aether Revolt, and I think that's going to take up a huge portion of spoiler season, and a lot of the excitement will be geared towards what masterpieces we expect to see and which ones will be spoiled. So I think maybe they're getting a little bit of the actual set out there ahead of time to kind of generate a little bit of a buzz about it, and then they're going to leave those masterpieces as kind of the big thing for the set. So yeah, those are spoilers. Just wanted to kind of catch up to date before spoiler season gets here and share with you guys my thoughts and opinions about the cards that have already been spoiled from the set. So as always, I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I'm curious. I would say the card I'm most curious about is Tezzeret, because it seems like it has an insanely powerful -7, but some weaker abilities to back it up. And I'm just already like, I can see myself playing with this sort of card. I really like this sort of card. But anyway, there you go. My name's Timothy. I would love to hear from you guys. So like, comment, and subscribe, especially comment, so we can talk about these cards. And then, yeah. I will see you guys when we start seeing some more spoilers. Thanks for watching, and I will see y'all next time.